Something rare is about to happen across the United States, and I don't mean one storm system passing through. I don't mean a single heat wave or a single line of thunderstorms. I mean everything colliding at the same time, in the same week, across different parts of the same country. On one side of the nation, temperatures are about to climb to numbers that barely sound believable. We're talking about 110, even 115 degrees. Not a feels-like number, not something padded by humidity. The actual air temperature, the kind of heat that can burn through the soles of your shoes if you stand on the wrong stretch of pavement too long. The kind that turns a steering wheel into something you can't touch with bare hands. The kind that can put a healthy person in the hospital just from being outside too long. And while that's happening in one region, something completely different is spinning up somewhere else. A storm machine is switching on. Not a single storm. Not two storms. Wave after wave of violent thunderstorms are lining up to pound the same stretch of the Midwest and Great Lakes, day after day for days in a row. We're talking about straight-line winds strong enough to snap tree branches and send them crashing through windows. We're talking about hail falling from the sky the size of golf balls. And we're talking about tornadoes. Real ones. The kind capable of leveling a house in a matter of seconds. But here's the part almost nobody's talking about. There's a third danger tucked behind all of this, one that doesn't make for dramatic footage, one that creeps up on people only after the storms have already passed through. And it might end up being the most dangerous piece of this entire pattern. I'll get to it. But first, you need to understand how all of these pieces connect, because once you see the full picture, you'll understand exactly why meteorologists across the country have their eyes locked on their screens right now. This is one of those rare stretches where every ingredient lines up at once. The heat feeds the storms. The storms create the hidden danger. And that hidden danger is the one most people won't notice coming until it's already arrived. There's one more piece of this story I haven't mentioned yet either. The Atlantic Ocean, the birthplace of hurricanes, is behaving strangely right now. On the surface, it looks like good news. But underneath that calm, there's a catch, and it's one that could matter a great deal before the season is finished. We'll get there. So let's take this apart, piece by piece. I want you to walk away understanding exactly what's coming, exactly where it's headed, and exactly what you should be doing about it. Because this is the kind of forecast where knowing a few days ahead of time could genuinely keep the people you care about safe. If this kind of breakdown is useful to you, if you'd rather understand what's actually happening instead of just being scared by a headline, go ahead and subscribe now, because this pattern is still evolving. The setup for Sunday alone could shift substantially in the next few days, and when it does, I want you seeing it first. That's the whole point of this channel. Not hype, not panic, just clear, honest information you can actually use. Turn on notifications too, because you're going to want to know the moment anything changes this week. Now let's start with the heat, because that's where this entire chain of events begins. Picture a massive blanket of hot air parked directly over the middle of the country, and it isn't moving. Think of it as an invisible lid clamped over a pot. Somebody cranked the burner all the way up and then sealed the lid down tight so nothing underneath can escape. The air trapped beneath just keeps absorbing more and more heat with no way out. The wind can't push it away. The clouds can't punch through it. It just sits there, cooking everything below. That is exactly what's happening over the central and southern plains right now. The numbers coming out of this setup are staggering. Across parts of southern Kansas and northern Oklahoma, highs are expected to push toward 115 degrees. Sit with that number for a second, because 115 is not just a hot afternoon. It's a scorcher today. That is genuinely dangerous heat, the kind where the National Weather Service starts pleading with people to stay indoors, the kind where roads buckle, where power grids strain toward their limits, and where a person can end up seriously ill simply walking from a building to their car. And this isn't a one-day event, which is exactly what makes it so much more serious. If this were a single blistering afternoon, your body could handle it. Drink some water, stay inside for a few hours, and you'd bounce back the next day. But this heat is sticking around. By Saturday, it starts pushing outward, spreading north into South Dakota and Nebraska, where temperatures climb well past 100 degrees. Places that would normally be enjoying a pleasant summer day somewhere in the 80s or low 90s are suddenly staring down triple digits that feel completely out of place for that part of the country. By Sunday and into Monday, it intensifies even further. Cities across central Kansas could see highs near 112 degrees. St. Louis could hit 101, and across a wide swath of the southern and central plains, there's simply no relief in sight. Day after day, the thermometer barely drops, and that includes overnight. That's the detail people tend to overlook. When the daytime high is 112, you'd expect a meaningful cool down once the sun goes down, but underneath a heat dome like this one, nighttime temperatures stay dangerously elevated too. Your body never actually gets the recovery period it needs. You go to sleep hot. You wake up hot. And the next day arrives even hotter than the one before it. This grip is expected to hold through roughly Tuesday or Wednesday of next week before it finally begins to break. That's the better part of a full week of relentless, extreme heat bearing down on millions of people. Here's something I think matters more than almost anything else in this forecast. Heat doesn't look frightening. It doesn't generate dramatic video the way a tornado tearing through a subdivision does, or the way a hurricane slamming into a coastline does. Nobody points a camera at heat the same way. And yet, heat kills more people across the United States every single year than tornadoes, hurricanes, and floods combined. That's not opinion. That's what the data shows, year after year. Heat quietly sits at the top of the list of weather killers, largely because people underestimate it. They assume they can push through it. They assume it's just an unusually warm day, and then they end up in real trouble. So if you're anywhere in the central or southern plains this week, please take this seriously. Check in on elderly neighbors. Make sure pets have water and access to shade. Never, under any circumstance, leave a child or an animal inside a parked car, not even for a minute. In 115-degree heat, the inside of a parked car can reach 150 degrees in under 15 minutes. That kind of temperature can be fatal. Drink water before you actually feel thirsty. Stay indoors during the hottest stretch of the afternoon whenever possible. And if you must be outside, take breaks in the shade and pay attention to warning signs like dizziness, confusion, or nausea. Those are your body telling you something is wrong. Listen to it. Now here's where the story takes a genuinely fascinating turn, because that same dome of heat sitting over the middle of the country isn't just cooking everything beneath it, it's also building a factory built specifically for producing storms. And what it's about to produce is something else entirely. Here's the mechanism. You've got this enormous dome of superheated air pressing down like a weight over the central plains. Nothing underneath it can move, but weather never likes to sit still for long. The atmosphere is constantly trying to rebalance itself. When one region gets extremely hot, the surrounding air responds. It rushes inward, it rises, it collides with cooler air nearby, and whenever hot air and cool air slam into one another, that's when things turn violent. Think about where that dome sits, right over the central plains. To its north, the air is considerably cooler, and the jet stream, that fast-moving river of wind high above the surface, is running right along the northern edge of the dome. That boundary is exactly where all the action unfolds. The dome is pumping heat and moisture upward. The jet stream is dragging in cooler air and stronger wind from the northwest. And right at the seam, where those two forces meet, the atmosphere becomes wildly unstable. Picture shaking up a bottle of soda and then cracking the cap. That built-up energy has to go somewhere, and it goes straight up, fast, in the form of towering thunderstorms. That's why, while the southern plains bake under deadly heat, the northern plains, the Midwest, and the Great Lakes are simultaneously getting hammered by severe storms. Same underlying cause, two completely different nightmares depending on where you happen to live. It's worth pausing on just how much energy is actually involved in a setup like this. A heat dome doesn't just sit there passively. It actively pumps moisture into the atmosphere from the ground up, from soil, from crops, from lakes and rivers across the region. That moisture rises, and once it reaches the boundary where the dome's heat meets the cooler air being dragged in by the jet stream, it condenses violently, releasing enormous amounts of energy in the process. That's the fuel these storms are running on. It's the same basic principle behind why the most intense thunderstorm outbreaks in this country so often happen right on the edges of heat domes rather than underneath them. Directly beneath the dome, the air is too stable, too capped for storms to break through. It's along the margins, where that cap weakens and cooler air can intrude, that all the violence gets unleashed. Let's walk through how this plays out day by day, because timing matters a great deal here. Today and tonight, the first wave is already rolling through. Across the upper Midwest, from Iowa up into Minnesota and across into Wisconsin and Michigan, widespread thunderstorms are expected through the afternoon and evening. The main threat with this batch is straight-line wind, gusts powerful enough to snap power poles, flip trampolines, and turn loose debris into airborne hazards. Large hail is also a real possibility, especially farther west across South Dakota and Nebraska, where storms can build especially tall and especially aggressive. I want to flag something here. The official outlook labels today's tornado risk as low, and it genuinely is low, but I wouldn't call it zero. There's a corridor running roughly from around Des Moines up toward central Wisconsin, where near-surface winds are expected to shift and strengthen late in the afternoon. When that happens, even an otherwise ordinary-looking thunderstorm can suddenly start rotating. It's uncommon on a day like today, but it's not impossible. If you're anywhere in that corridor, having a reliable way to receive warnings on your phone is the single smartest move you can make. Meanwhile, along the East Coast, a separate cluster of storms is expected to develop through the afternoon. The stretch from around Cleveland and Columbus eastward toward Philadelphia and Washington could see scattered thunderstorms with some strong gusts mixed in. Tornado risk there is very low, but on a hot, humid August afternoon, the atmosphere occasionally throws a curveball. A quick spin-up tornado, the kind that forms and vanishes within minutes, is never entirely off the table when the air is this loaded with moisture. Stay alert even where the risk looks minimal. Down in the desert southwest, monsoon season is running at full strength. Arizona and New Mexico will see repeated rounds of heavy rain, and flash flooding remains a real concern in the usual danger zones. If you live near a wash or a canyon in that part of the country, you already know the routine. Stay out of low-lying terrain whenever the rain is coming down hard. Saturday is the calmest day in this whole stretch, and it's worth saying plainly that not every day in an active pattern has to be dramatic. Saturday's storm activity mostly shifts toward the interior northeast, with Pennsylvania and New York the main areas to keep an eye on. Scattered thunderstorms could bring gusty winds and isolated hail during the afternoon hours. There's a narrow window, roughly between 3 and 7 in the evening, where a brief tornado somewhere in central or eastern Pennsylvania isn't completely out of the question. But overall, Saturday functions more like a breather ahead of the main event. And the main event is Sunday. Out of every day in this forecast, Sunday carries the highest potential for something significant, and I want to be precise about what that means. I'm not saying Sunday is guaranteed to turn into a disaster. I'm saying the ingredients for something serious are coming together, and if they line up the way several computer models are suggesting, Sunday could become a major, severe weather day across the upper Midwest. Here's what's driving it. By Sunday, both the winds high in the atmosphere and the winds closer to the surface are expected to strengthen. The upper level flow shifts from a northwesterly direction to more of a westerly one. That might sound like a minor tweak, but it isn't. It's a big deal, because when upper winds come out of the west while lower winds come out of the south, the atmosphere starts to twist with height. That twisting motion is precisely what the most dangerous category of thunderstorm needs in order to form. That storm type is called a supercell. I know it sounds like something pulled from a comic book, but it's an actual well-defined weather term. A supercell is a thunderstorm that carries its own rotating engine inside it, and it's capable of producing very large hail and strong, long-track tornadoes. Sunday's atmosphere is shaping up to hand these storms nearly everything they'd need to thrive. The amount of available energy for storms to feed on is expected to be enormous, the kind of numbers that make even experienced forecasters take a second look. Across parts of Minnesota and Iowa, the atmosphere could be so loaded with fuel that storms won't need much of a trigger before they explode into full development. Here's roughly how Sunday could unfold. The morning may start out quiet, maybe a few scattered showers, nothing especially alarming. But keep a close watch on the afternoon, because that's when conditions could shift quickly. A supercell or two could develop across the northern part of Wisconsin. As evening arrives, additional storms may fire and eventually consolidate into a long line of thunderstorms marching across the region like an advancing wall. If that scenario plays out, cities like Milwaukee, Grand Rapids, and possibly even Detroit could be facing severe weather overnight into early Monday, with damaging wind as the primary concern alongside hail and the possibility of an isolated tornado earlier in the cycle before the storms fully consolidate into a line. I want to spend a moment on this because overnight severe weather is one of the most underappreciated dangers in all of meteorology. During daylight hours, you can watch a storm approach. You can see the clouds darken, you can see the sky take on that greenish tint, you can spot rotation if a tornado starts forming. You have visual warning built in. At night, none of that exists. All you have is sound, the wind howling against the windows, thunder crashing somewhere close. Maybe the power cuts out and you're left sitting in total darkness while the house shudders around you. That's frightening on its own, and it's dangerous for a very specific reason. People are asleep. They're not watching the sky. They might sleep straight through a tornado siren, and if their phone isn't configured to receive emergency alerts, they might not even know a warning has been issued until it's already too late. That's why if you're anywhere in the Midwest or Great Lakes right now, today, before Sunday arrives, take a minute and check your phone's alert settings. Make sure emergency notifications are actually turned on. If you own a weather radio, put fresh batteries in it, and know right now where you'd go in your home if you needed shelter at 2 in the morning. A basement is the safest option. An interior room on the lowest floor with no windows is the next best choice. Just have a plan in place before you need it. Think about how differently that scenario feels compared to a daytime storm. During the day, even a fast-moving severe thunderstorm gives you some warning through your own senses. At 2 or 3 in the morning, all of that visual information disappears completely, and the only thing standing between you and being caught off guard is whether your phone is set up correctly and whether you've decided in advance where you're going to go. That's not a decision you want to be making in the dark, half asleep, with the power already out. Make it now, while the sky is still calm. Looking toward Monday and beyond, a sharp temperature swing is expected to follow behind the system, and honestly, it's the kind of shift that reminds you just how extreme American weather can be. No other country on Earth experiences this range of conditions all within the same stretch of days quite the way the United States does. Scorching desert-level heat on one end, temperatures flirting with near freezing on the other, violent tornadoes and flash flooding woven through the middle, all of it stemming from a single connected pattern. For farmers up in northern Minnesota, those cooler readings are worth watching closely, since cold like that at this point in the growing season can stress crops. The encouraging news is that current guidance doesn't show temperatures dropping all the way down to an actual freeze, so a hard frost probably isn't in the cards just yet. Still, it's a reminder that summer doesn't last forever, and pattern shifts of this magnitude can make the seasons feel like they're turning almost overnight. Now, let's talk about the strangest thread in this whole story, the one tied to the tropics. Right now, the Atlantic Ocean is quiet, and I don't mean mildly quiet. I mean unusually, almost eerily quiet for this point in hurricane season. By early August, you'd typically expect to see at least some tropical activity stirring, waves rolling off the coast of Africa, disturbances attempting to organize over warm water, something. Right now, there's almost nothing out there, and there's a specific reason behind it. A strong El Niño pattern is currently in place. El Niño refers to a warming of waters out in the Pacific Ocean, and it has ripple effects on weather patterns across the entire globe. One of those effects is an increase in wind shear over the Atlantic. Remember the shear I mentioned earlier? The kind that helps thunderstorms organize into rotating supercells? Over the Atlantic basin, that same force does the opposite. Instead of helping storms organize, it tears them apart before they can get going. It's like trying to stack a tower of blocks while someone keeps knocking it over the moment it starts to take shape. Tropical systems need calm, organized conditions in order to develop, and right now the upper atmosphere over the Atlantic is anything but calm. Every time a disturbance tries to spin up, the shear rips it apart before it can become anything meaningful. On the surface, that sounds like nothing but good news, and in a lot of ways it is. Fewer hurricanes forming means fewer direct threats to the East Coast and Gulf Coast right now. But there's a catch, and it's an important one. All of that warm water sitting in the Atlantic isn't disappearing. The ocean has spent the entire summer absorbing heat, and because no storms have come along to churn that water up and release the built-up energy, it just keeps accumulating. The water keeps warming. The stored energy keeps piling higher. So what happens if later in the season, maybe in September or October, that wind shear finally relaxes enough for a storm to break through? That storm would suddenly have access to all of that stockpiled energy, and it could intensify fast, dangerously fast. We're talking about the kind of storm that can go from a disorganized disturbance to a major hurricane within a matter of days. That sort of rapid intensification ranks among the most dangerous phenomena in all of weather, because it leaves people with almost no time to prepare. History is full of examples of quiet hurricane seasons that produced only one or two storms total, but those storms turned out to be absolute monsters. It only takes one, and that's precisely why, even with the Atlantic looking calm at the moment, nobody within the weather community is letting their guard down. The tropics will be watched closely through the rest of the season, and if anything begins to organize out there, you'll hear about it. For now, just understand that a quiet Atlantic is not the same thing as a safe Atlantic. It simply means the energy is building and waiting for its moment. I've covered a lot of ground here: heat, storms, tornadoes, flooding, a sharp cold front, and a strangely silent hurricane season. So let me pull all of it together into one clear picture. Step back and look at this entire pattern from above. And there's really one central character driving the whole story, that dome of heat. It's the anchor everything else revolves around. The dome is what creates the extreme temperatures baking the central and southern plains. Its northern edge, where all that trapped heat collides with cooler air and strengthening wind, is what generates the daily rounds of severe thunderstorms. Those storms, repeating over the same areas day after day, are what build the flooding risk. And eventually a cold front punches through and finally breaks the heat, but not before delivering a dramatic temperature crash that can take parts of the country from summer inferno to near winter conditions within just a few days. It's all connected. One underlying pattern, one root cause, several different dangers branching off from it. And that's exactly what makes this particular week so unusual. Most of the time, we're dealing with a single major weather threat at a time. This week, nearly all of them are unfolding simultaneously. So here's what I want you to walk away with. If you live in the central or southern plains, take the heat seriously. It doesn't look as dramatic as a tornado, but it's statistically more dangerous. Stay hydrated. Stay indoors during the hottest hours of the day. Check on anyone who might need help. And never, ever leave a person or a pet inside a parked car. If you live in the Midwest, the Great Lakes, or the Ohio Valley, treat every afternoon and evening this week as a stretch of time to stay weather aware. Make sure your phone alerts are turned on. Know your shelter plan in advance. Pay particularly close attention to Sunday, the day carrying the highest potential for something significant, especially across the upper Midwest. And if storms roll through overnight, have a plan ready for that scenario too. A weather radio with fresh batteries can wake you up in a way your phone alone might not. If you live anywhere that could see heavy rainfall later in the week, remember the golden rule. Turn around, don't drown. A flooded road is never a shortcut. It's a trap. And if you live along the Atlantic coast, don't let a quiet stretch of tropics lull you into a false sense of security. The season is far from over. Stay ready. I also want to be straightforward with you about one more thing, because honesty matters more to me than sounding certain about everything. The details of this forecast are still evolving. The heat and today's storm activity, I feel very confident about those. Sunday's severe weather threat is real, and the ceiling on how significant it could become is genuinely high, but exactly how it plays out remains uncertain. The flooding risk heading into the middle of next week is a real concern, but it isn't locked in yet. And the idea of another storm system developing roughly a week from now is, at this point, nothing more than a hint on the horizon. As the days progress, some of these threats will grow more defined, others might fade entirely, and I'll be right here updating you as the picture sharpens. That's the nature of a forecast like this one. It isn't a single, fixed prediction. It's a story that keeps developing in real time, and the difference between a manageable day and a genuinely dangerous one can come down to catching a forecast change just a few hours earlier than you otherwise would have. So stay with me through this one, because this is a week where paying close attention genuinely matters. That's going to do it for this breakdown. If this helped make sense of a chaotic and fast-moving weather situation, tap that like button, since it helps more people find this video when they're searching for answers of their own. Subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you're ready the moment Sunday's forecast comes into sharper focus. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Out of everything covered here, the extreme heat, the Sunday tornado threat, the flooding risk, or that unusually quiet Atlantic hurricane season, which one concerns you the most, and why? Drop it in the comments. I read through every one of them, and it's always striking how different the answers are depending on where you live and what you've already been through. Stay safe out there. I'll see you in the next one.